Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Tina. Good morning to everybody. Thank you for sharing. So there is quite a lot. So welcome to this, it is the third of the sessions for Hillingdon, and this is quite a lot more involved. There's a lot to get through. And while I'm not going to whiz through it 100 miles an hour, I might just get through it because last time I did this, we almost run out of time. So I'm going to feel free, put questions in the either the Q&A or the chat, and I will try to get to them as we go along, and I'll try my best to leave some time for Q&As at the end. Um, so this session is a bit more involved. It's a bit more about the process and some of the terminology, etc. But thus far, with the other two sessions, we've talked about language and approach and building relationships, which are all absolutely key. And some of those elements will find themselves into this presentation today as well. But a lot of this is, I suppose, is more technical, but I don't need to take that word too seriously. It's just about understanding how the processes. Good morning, Chet. How the process actually works, some of the terminology, so that you become more familiar with it. That's the aim. You always need to be an expert on responding to tenders by the end of this, but certainly more familiar and aware of how this actually works. So, we can go to the next slide. There we go. Very quickly about me. If you've seen this, you've seen this slide before, so this isn't about me, it's about you guys. But I've been involved in tendering on both sides of the fence, both writing tenders for people to bid on, and also responding to tenders over the last, well, since 5 years of capital, about 10 years with my time in the energy industry before that. I'm now a specialist in this area. I work closely with as a partner with Glendowen. I'm based in the north, so I'm not in your area. I'm up in Preston, Lancashire, where we're going to be expanding this fit to bid program into the north, which is something we're very, very proud of. So just quickly, the agenda between now and 12 o'clock. We're going to go through terminology and tender documents. We're going to go through a live example of an ICT, which is an invitation tender. We're going to talk about evaluation methodology and MEET. I'll leave you to consider what MEET probably stands for. We will get to it later. And we also have tender timelines. It's very, very important. And then talk about the tender business model, which is more slightly more deeper dive into detail on say the graphs we've done, what's ESG, which is about environmental, social, governance, and health, and social value. Those two are related in a variety of different ways. And then the power of consulting and partnerships, and then hopefully time for Q&A in the box. So as you can see, there's a lot to get through. So I'm going to try not to waste too much time. So you've seen this before. This is the graphic to display the fit to bid process. And the key elements here that I really want to call out is there's an online bid capability assessment with a series of if you haven't been filled in, please do. It helps enormously with the one-to-ones. You might have gone through this process. I'd be aware, I'm not aware of your timetable for this particular one, but if you haven't done it, please do it because it gives you an indication of where you stand and also will make those one-to-one sessions far more productive. Having gone through this, we've talked about how to engage with procurement, we've talked about bidding skills, sales enablement, we've talked about empathic language, etc. And you'll get some more along advice in this detail, and you'll get more of it into the one-to-ones. And then ultimately, the really powerful part of Fit to Bid is the meet the buyer events, to find yourself in the room with professional buyers from both the local authority in the public sector and also from what we call tier 1 and tier 2 buyers, because the large companies. It's a fabulous opportunity to be in front of those people. So we're going to talk about a few elements of the public sector versus private sector. And this is it's just the way that they're similar but different, and the differences really matter. So about budgets and funding. So we're generalizing because certainly in the commercial world, there's lots of freedom as to how different companies operate. So we're generalizing here, but being more specific about how the public sector works. So budgets for the public sector are allocated annually. Generally speaking, there will be the peaks year. There will be April to March, which means that in March they're often trying to use up their budgets. That's a whole subject on its own. But that's whereas a lot of commercial companies, they build budgets based upon business requirements. They might have a business plan for the year, but actually, well, it doesn't in the public sector. Once that funding is allocated, they know what they've got to spend or what they've got to spend it on and how they've got to spend it wisely. When I regulations, public sector is highly restricted by legislation. Which is one of the things that can make this process slightly hard work, is the fact that the regulations, the legislation they operate by is very, very, very strict. They don't have any leeway. Um, and Like, there's definitely restrictions. Now, it depends upon the industry, of course. I come originally from the energy industry. The energy industry is highly legislated, but highly regulated. Not all areas are. So again, to generalize the majority of business compared to the public sector is low restrictions. It doesn't mean there aren't any regulations at all, of course. That's a slightly different thing. Is the sound phone? You know what? Should we try that? Can you confirm that's better? It would help if I move my microphone. There you go. Can you just confirm you can hear that better now? My apologies to everybody in the room. That should be much, much better now. Yes, there you go. No point in buying an expensive microphone and then have it in the corner covered up. My sincere apologies to everybody. Sorry about that. Right, okay. Well, I certainly signed this side. I think if others are here, I can't help with that, so I'm afraid. I think I've done. Let's see if it clears itself up. I'm sorry if you have any issues. Still listening. 1 second. 1 second. No, I don't. There's nothing more. I don't see anything here, Lisa, that I can do. I'm using the correct microphone, and it's now nearer to me. So I will try and speak as clearly as possible for those that are having any sound issues. My apologies if you are. Um, to carry on, just quickly, rather than go through every part of this, what we're trying to show with this is the differentiators between the private sector and the public sector. The key ones here is, for one thing, the process, the specified process, and we will go through some of that today about what that specified process looks like. And there's no real leeway. There's some slight nuance sometimes, but essentially it always operates in the same way. You can't circumnavigate the process when you're dealing with the public sector. Whereas in the private sector, companies can have their own processes. And it might be a lot more straightforward. It might be more along the lines of a quote rather than a full proposal, depending on how they operate. And the time is also a really big issue for something to be aware of. When you look at any tender documents, they will have a timeline in it. It'll be really, really clear your opportunity to ultimately put your bid in before that, an opportunity to ask questions, done. And if it says, and I think we said this before on the other presentations we've done, if it says 12 o'clock on a Friday, I say I'm making this up. Say it's the 22nd of June 2025 at 3 o'clock, then it is that date at 3 o'clock, not 5 past 3. It's very, very specific. Whereas in a commercial world, it is generally more flexible. Transparency, and this is a positive. They have to be complete in the private sector. They have to be in the public sector. They have to be completely transparent. Whereas in the commercial world, less so. In fact, they might see some things of being, anti-competitive, and they might see things of being, their own person to protect their business. The prime motivation in the public sector is to spend money wisely and fairly. And I always say that all of the people on here, you've got two hats. One of those hats is as a business owner and operator, and you want to run a successful and financially viable business. But also, you're a council tax and taxpayer, and you want to believe that your money is being spent wisely. So you have both ways of looking at this. And just really quickly, in stakeholders, many and wide in the public sector, it can be quite difficult sometimes identifying every stakeholder you might have, whereas generally with a commercial company, it's identifiable. And the overall focus, reducing spend and saving is a big focus, but also delivery of a service as well as the spend. Whereas generally commercial operations is about increasing profit margins, maybe shareholder value, etc. So look, feedback from our clients over the years. These are the key issues facing SMEs, and I'm not going to go through every single one. Most of these are fairly kind of real common and they're kind of common sense. But the few I want to pick out is insufficient experience in the public sector. Well, you're gaining more experience here, and the more the more you learn, and the more you're involved in the process, the easier it will be. It's like starting anything. The next one is the myth. The industry is dominated by big companies that lock you out. The first part is true. It is dominated in certain areas by large companies, but they can't lock you out. Most, apart from very few large infrastructure tenders, they are open to SMEs. And you have exactly the same ability and the same right to apply and expect to win that if you are the best. If you put the best presentation forward, you put the best response, and you are the most cost effective and most efficient, then you can win over large companies. It's not a given that a large company will win over a small one. There are some practical criteria in a tender that stop you being considered. Yes, there are some things in there. We will get to some of the things that might stop you being considered and how you might get around them. Dated or no client reviews, testimonials, that's a big deal. And that's something on all of you that you should make sure that reviews and testimonials are up to date in the last year. It's incredibly strong. That builds from there is then you build case studies off the back of that. You don't feel you've got time to devote the property submissions. Yes, that's an issue because it is time consuming. You have limited knowledge. You're gaining knowledge on a call like this. And you've no idea of what to put into response to make it a winning one. We talked previously about the language that's used, and some of what we'll do today is about more some of the technical things you need to supply and the information that they're expecting. So we'll go through some of the biggest secrets of doing business with the government. It's necessarily secrets. It's things you might not necessarily know. And by the end of this, you'll be armed with more information and you'll overcome some of these challenges. So tender terminology, there is a lot, and look at all of it. The government loves acronyms. So there is one in bold there because we're going to go through one. The PQQ pre-qualification questionnaire. It's a standard document that can be reused, that talks about your company, what its financial makeup is, who has overall control, if you have a complex supply chain, how that operates. And essentially that's information that's applied for every single tender response. So you can use and reuse a pre-qualification questionnaire. It can look like a daunting document, but actually it's just a questionnaire on how your business is set up. The invitation of the tender, the ICT, is the details on that actual tender, and we're going to go into more detail on that as we go through in the next few slides. A request for proposal is something kind of slightly more general. That means that's before a tender, where they might put pre-tender. That's generally look at the market and see whether they're suggesting, the solution they're suggesting. When I say they, I mean a local authority or a government department. They're kind of testing the water, and they'll get responses to that, and then that may lead within the invitation to tender. A request for communication is a kind of lower level. That's generally speaking, that's something at a lower value, and that can be something where it doesn't actually require a full detailed proposal response or tender response. Framework agreements are we could do a whole session just on frameworks and what's called dynamic purchasing systems. There's related but different. Framework agreements are large agreements normally by a large department, and they need multiple suppliers in different disciplines, and you request to join that framework agreement. And then once you're on that, then you don't need to go through the pre-qualification again. You then draw down and you have the opportunity to bid on parts of that work which you wouldn't have been able to if you weren't part of the framework agreement. The dynamic purchase system is very similar. The difference is that that's all online. And is used a lot for digital services as well as physical services. So they are actually very similar. Okay, let's talk about an ITT, an invitation to tender, and they do slightly differ, but really everything that's on this slide would be all the different components of that invitation to tender. So introduction and background information on the department. We are this department, this is what we do. And these are our imperatives, and this is what the aim of this tender is. This is what we're trying to achieve. Exactly what that tells you is the problem they have that they need to solve. The sense of what that is. Terms and conditions, legal parameters surrounding the tender. That would be, it needs to work within a particular legal framework, depending on what it is. There are multiple ways of going into that, but they will be there if there are particular conditions that need to be met. They'll be made very clear. Specification, the description of exactly what they need in order to solve the problem in the introduction. And then the instruction of the tender submission. So that tends to be how you are going to respond. And what that means is what, not just where, and likely to be a portal, likely to be a separate portal, which you'll be able to go in free, and you will put all your documents in that. It will tell you the kind of documents they expect. There may be restrictions on the number of words for a particular answer to a particular question. That will be made really, really clear in the instruction for tender submission. So there'll be questions. There'll be questions for the tender response. So there'll be questions that you need to answer. They will be relevant to that particular tender. And they'll be about how you're going to do something and how you're going to meet certain levels, and how you're going to report them after you've met those service levels. And your price and delivery schedule, exactly how you price it, how you're going to deliver it, how you're going to do that efficiently. It's more than just the price; it's the details around how you deliver that financially. Then there will always be a formal tender. That's just a declaration that was signed by the bidder to say that you're following the directions exactly, along with your certificate of non-collusion, that you're doing this, you're managing this tender on your own, not included with any other department, and you don't have inside information, and then a whole load of other things. And then if the grant proposal contract, if you're successful, then you'll get a first contract to sign, and then you'll know. Then it'll be agreed. You'll know ahead of time. You'll know exactly what the payment schedule is, how long the contract is for, etc. So that's the elements that go into an ITP with the draft proposed contract. Is that's what you're aiming for right at the bottom there. So some kind of negatives, if you like. These things that are important to understand about mandatory and discretionary exclusion. There are situations where, depending on the answers you give, that you won't be able to carry on with this tender. So, for example, these are taken from a tender that Brandywine actually responded to. So they are lift and shift from what was a live tender. So in that public contracts regulated to and fit, we exclude any organisation that is guilty of any of the offences in these regulations, and they will be things like have you about fraud, about tax evasion, have you been are you on an exclusion list for any other serious? So these are the things that your company has basically been bluntly black mark against you, and if you say yes to any of those questions, then there'll be serious doubts about your appropriateness, and yet it's a blind. They will reject you based upon those. So you know ahead of time, and the regulations there were all about fraud based, money laundering, all those kind of things. And if you find yourself in that position, you will be mandatory excluded. Discretionary exclusion is slightly different. So they will talk about regulations and they'll ask you the details. So an example would be it's may well be the last question about the financial position of the company and the director. And there might be a director that had CCJ that's been paid, but that stays on your record for 6 years, even though it's paid. You declare them, you always declare with all honesty and openness, and then it's for them to decide, well, actually, that's not an issue. The reason why you're doing this is because there is a huge difference between you declaring something, being honest and open, and when they do their checks, them discovering something, which I think goes through most of our life. But actually, if they discover something, it may well be they'll tell you you've not declared something you could have done, and it may well be your submission won't get any further. It's something to be aware of. So financial information, they are always going to ask you for some level of financial information. This is because they feel that they need, if you have a 3-year contract with, say, a local authority, a lot of this is based upon trusting that you are still going to be around, that your company operates appropriately. So they might have a minimum turnover they expect. And they'll ask you what your turnover was in the last year. And they'll ask you about your bank's accounts, etc. They may run a credit check. They may not, but if they do, means the chance of being excluded if you are a high, medium risk rating. Or they might just ask you for more information and always answer with real clarity. The thing about all this is to be as open and as honest as possible. The financial industry sometimes horrify people. I had quite with it. So, well, why are they asking all this? And it's down to us. They need to understand that the business being operated appropriately and legally, and also that you are not thinking that because if you want a 3-year contract, it needs to be sure that you're going to be around these 3 years. If they think you're not, that's going to be cause for concern. So we'll also ask about insurance. This is the standard question. They'll ask for what the level you expect and what level you have. And what's perfectly fine in this is if you don't have that, and but you say you are willing to obtain a successful, yes, so you're saying you will up that your cover if you win the contract. That's completely fine to do that. You're just saying that you wouldn't expect you to. Um, and they will ask you about, you know, you're going to include, if the government, so you're obviously confirm that you'll comply with the Privacy Council best practice and legal obligations. Obviously, you say yes to that. If you're unsure, they should have shared that, but if they're not, if you're not sure about them, download the information. It will be on the council's website, most likely. And then you can check to make sure that you're not agreeing something for any reason that your company's not able to do or doesn't agree with. Okay. You may be asked about whether you think you'll be able to deliver this. And it makes a bit of a question given you're looking through a tender response. But you can see material reasons not limited to, but including the financial expertise, capacity, concerns, threat, or risk. If you really think this is really, really good, but we haven't got the capacity to do it, and think really hard about whether that actually works or not. Can you build more resource into your tender response, or actually is it beyond your means? It is as important sometimes to evaluate these tenders as for the ones that you couldn't go for as the ones that you should, because it's a lot of time to put into something for actually something that you actually know from day one that you wouldn't be able to deliver. So the what's called a technical method statement here. This is basically how they look at scoring your submission and when you're responding. So look at these three areas here. The weighting, before you look at the details, shows you how important the answer to that question is. So of those three, they're all important, but obviously service delivery, providing the method statement outlining how you're going to deliver that service or those works or that product or whatever it is has a much heavier weighting than the mobilization plan, which is actually how you put that into an operational question about how you deliver. Your management structure information is important, slightly more important than mobilization plan on this particular one. This will not be the same on every one that you see. This for this particular tender response, this is how this was good. So everything is important. 10% of your scoring is always is incredibly important. But it does there's a lot more work we expected in the service delivery than there is in the mobilization plan, to give you an idea. So looking again at these three, your experience, 20%, yes, they want to know what you've done. And can you prove what you've done? What can you evidence that's relevant? What relevant experience can you demonstrate? So you can't just say you did it. You need to put work in the evidence, the fact that you've got that you've done that work to a particular standard in the last 3 years. And including contract value and detail the service you provided and the companies you provided to, or other departments you provided to. So when talking about the weight again, weighting, that looks at heavier weighting than business engagement, where they're talking about how your workforce, so your people so this was for a put in context. This was for a data that Brandon did on a program very similar to the one that you're engaging in now. So that was a reasonable question. Based on the description of your experience and engaging and working with a wide range of SMEs to encourage them to participate, etc., etc. So we had to talk about, I'm using the royal we there, Brandon had to talk about what they've done in the past specifically. So not just for experience, but what specifically you've done that actually was relevant to this program. So what other programs like this have you delivered before? And then very importantly, about equalities, about how diverse and inclusive you are, what communities you worked on, what similar contracts, and how have you met those Black and minority, etc., targets, or how have you worked within those, and how have you developed that within your company? And does that align with the council and how they operate? Because you'll be able to track how they operate, what their values are around there, and make sure that align. And then we don't live in London. So yes, if there's something like a London living wage, but it's a question. There's no waiting. There's not a question. So both of those don't have a weighting. But the last one does. So if you presently pay your staff a London living wage or propose for this, please segment how this will bring added value to the service. That's an interesting question. If you do you, But if you do, why? And that's a perfectly reasonable question to understand. Why does that extra cost of value get from it? It could be because of, excuse me, the specialist workforce located in the contract, etc. You need to be clear. But that's interesting. You have two questions there you'll answer, but there's no actual weight into them. It's just basically for information only. So, most economically advantageous tender. Um, um, there is some way, because I understand there's legislation put in later this year where this might change from most economically advantageous tender to most advantageous tender and pick the economically part out of it, because it is very important. Obviously, price does matter, but it isn't the only consideration. So let's talk about this a little while. Evaluation is scored on a combination of price and quality. So 75% price, 25% quality. So that's really about low price. And that would be an example of a tender that I've worked with that was that kind of split, was a facility management cleaning tender. And it was about delivery, it's the lowest price possible, meeting the quality demands, but the quality demands were fairly straightforward. And so it was a number of people delivering in a period of time. And because the quality requirements were there, but they were lower. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where the quality is everything. There's sometimes be something that's maybe slightly more technical, using IT as an example, where an IT delivery system, the quality would be very, very high. The price would matter, but the quality would be over the price. Often, 75-25 is quite extreme. It tends to be nearer 60-40, some are 50-50, but you always know ahead of time. So they'll use the questions you've answered. They'll use your financial evaluation. So which is normally a formula. They'll tell you how they're going to work out how you are the most advantageous tender. It'll be a combination of quality and price. And the tenders are ranked upon the aggregate or average of both those stages. So what's important here, I think, is to understand it isn't a race to the bottom. The reason the case is simply put the lowest price in, you win the tender. Then line them up, then look at the lowest price, you get it. Absolutely. And there might be situations where possibly that used to happen, but it absolutely does not now. It's very, very important that that's understood. And you can say that the assessment criteria, kind of obvious stuff there, quality, price, and technical ability, a combination of all the information. So that assessment criteria gives you an idea of all the information that you're expected to provide in order for them to decide whether you're the right company. So it is a lot of information to provide. So essentially, it will go almost every time to a 0 to 5 score against each section of the tender. This will normally be made really clear that this is how they're going to score. Obviously, what you're aiming for is 5s. If you look at that, so you exceed the required standard, you are able to deliver over and above what's required. And by that, what that often means is not necessarily over delivering more. It can often be, if it's a 3-year contract, if you put in your response that over those 3 years, you intend to improve the service over those 3 years, be more efficient, learn from the tender. That's the kind of thing they want to see. When I've always described the public sector as being a customer that is rather obsessed with how you do something, not just that you do it. So they do ask a lot of questions. They will expect reporting. So when they ask questions or that you provide reporting, that when it says response answers the questions with precision and relevance, that's what they want. They want information. They want to know, for example, how you can provide that information, and you systems in place. If you can demonstrate that, that's going to be really good. And includes improvement through innovation added value. And that goes back to the exceeding the required standard. If you can show that you aim to learn through the contract and deliver more and constantly work on kind of constant improvement, that's going to make a real difference. Good, meet the standard, the comprehensive response, the relevance to the questions, it's all good. And falls are very good. Then you start, and these are the areas you don't want to get into, where you're meeting most of it, but not could be more detail and more accuracy. A 3 is one of those, if you remember, you get feedback, you're not successful at 10, you'll get feedback. And if you've got an area where you get a 3, you need to look really, really hard at the response you made and where it wasn't strong enough. If you're going below that, if your scores are 2, 1, and hopefully not a 0, you really aren't essentially giving the questions the time, or possibly, and we did get into this in the other couple of sessions, you might not be actually answering the question. you might have read the question, answered it, but not answered it correctly. And one of the ways of making sure that that doesn't happen is to have a peer review. I mean, making sure that somebody else reviews your answers before you send them off. But what you're looking for is 4 and 5s, fives hopefully, but 4s are very good. And this is how the whole system will be, your response will be marked all the way through. So the 10-11 timetable is very specific. As you can see here, there's an example. Published on the 4th of July 2022, which is an old one. If there's a chance of site visits, that will be the date that we down. It's a slightly odd date, obviously a typo. The clarification deadline, what that means is up until that point, you can ask questions, and how about you put questions through the portal, and they will publish the answers to everybody. They won't say who asked the question, but they will publish the answers to everybody to help everybody. So it's really important to be on those portals looking at, you might have a question. It can be really fascinating to see the other questions that other companies ask and the answers that are given. You'll then have a submission deadline, which won't have a date, or have a time. So on the 22nd of July 2022, probably 12 o'clock, likely to be a Friday, you will have to be deadline back. That you'll have to put that response in by then. And what you still really aim to do is to be ready the day before. Don't, whatever you do, have it so you're only ready at 5 to 12 on the 22nd of July. Make sure that you're ready at least the day before. And then there's a evaluation. They might announce a stock list if that's the way it's going to work. They then might ask for presentations, depending on the kind of the way they're operating this. Some don't involve presentations, and some don't involve announcing a shortlist. But then there'll be notice of award, which will be public information, so know exactly who it's been awarded to, and then the contract start date. And between those two, there's then the work about how it's going to mobilize, etc., etc. So, but the thing about this is the timetable is very specific. When you're responding to these tenders, you need to have the timetable front and center, so you don't put all this work in and miss the appropriate deadlines or miss the opportunity to ask a question. If there's something you're not talking about, get on the portal, ask the question. So we said before, you focus on the buyer, what the buyer wants, not on what you want to sell. The other two we did on this, really went into this in a lot more detail, where we're saying about using empathic language, put yourself in a position and understand the problem that they want to they need to solve. Say, a local authority needs to solve what problem in Hillingdon needs to be solved, what service needs to be provided. These are the elements that you want to do. Define your market, how the job to be done. You look at the desired outcomes. What is it they really want? What is it they really, really need? You look at the outcomes that are met. What can you do? And you look if there are open segments that you can provide that maybe other ones can't. Then you formulate and deploy a winning strategy. And once you cover those areas, and you might use different terminology, if you put all those elements on, and you will submit a bid which is fit to win. There might be other elements why one would win or not, but if you get these right, excellent bids, tender responses or excellent bids, win. Poor ones don't. This is really as simple as that. So the quality really matters. So very quickly, I am very conscious of time. We've still got a lot to do. So what is it your customer trying to get done that will lead to the outcomes they seek? So what are they trying to achieve? Problems they're trying to solve, needs they're trying to satisfy, or what are the big outcomes? So defining your bids and tender strategy around the job to be done provides your company with a stable focal point around which to align investors' resources. So, generally speaking, with your own customers, what is it they're looking for you to help with? What is your customer trying to get done that will lead to the outcomes they seek? You don't necessarily have to put something in the QA, but I want you to think about that. So you think about what are they trying to achieve? What problems are they trying to solve? What needs are they trying to satisfy? And what are the big outcomes? And you need to think about with a local authority, it's not like a company where they just want a job done because that then enables them to do something else and make more money. With a local authority, it tends to be a part of a bigger problem they've got, or a bigger process that they're trying to. So it may well be this tender that you're looking at that you could serve actually is part of a much bigger program that they've done on their website. And we've said before, the beauty of responding to the public sector is the fact that you can go on the website and you can see what their plan is. Well, they might actually call it a business plan, but what their plans are over the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So when you're building your response, you can start building some of that in because you understand what they're trying to achieve, if that makes sense. Whoops, gone back a slide. So I'm going to go back to slide. My apologies. So this is what's to be in your head whenever you're building these responses. It should all be about customer. I know we say this a lot, but it's even more important when you're dealing with the public sector. What is it that they want to achieve? Really, who are they trying to do it for? What's the bigger problems they're trying to solve on? What are those big outcomes? What is it? What is it part of a bigger program? So to let you know, where I am in Preston, there is a lot of regenerative work being done in the centre of Preston, and there are lots and lots of small tenders for different work being done. But actually, they're all part of this much bigger work that's going on, been going on over the last 2 or 3 years, and is going to go on for the next 4 or 5. And understanding what the overall goals are and using some of that language in your response. I mean, actually, no, they understand what we're trying to do. These are people we could work with. If that makes sense. Right, now we're going to get into something new areas which are a little bit more heavy, I suppose. One is what's known as ESG, environmental social governance, and the other one is social value. One, in my mind, two sides of a same coin. So ESG could be described as do no harm. ESG is about reducing or limiting your impact, negative impact, both environmental, social, and social, and having the governance, and also can involve health as well. So it says it measures how your business integrates environmental, social, and governance practices into operations, as well as your business model, its impact, and its sustainability. So it's about not doing something and limiting your negative effect. It's been around for a long time, and it now finds itself into many, if not all, in some way, shape, or form, tender responses. So, for a small company, this might think, well, how can I even approach this? But there are ways. You just talk about what you do and how you do it. So, go into a little bit more information. Let's go environmental. So, energy use and efficiency, climate change strategy, waste reduction, biodiversity loss, greenhouse gas emissions, carbon footprint reduction. So, as a small company, my apologies, as a small company, one of those things you can reduce travel, or we've gone to electric vehicles, or we do all our meeting virtual now, or we're now using different heating systems. There's lots of ways around that you can actually show that you are reducing your impact upon the local area. Social, you pay fair and living wages. You're an equal opportunity employer. You have workplace health and safety perks. You have responsible supply chain. You reduce labour laws. You can also include well-being into that. You have well-being programs in place to reduce any kind of well-being issues within not just for your work, but also outside the business. These are key things where you realize your negative effect on your employees, and also you can expect that your supply chain will work in the same way. Your supply chain, your suppliers, if you have them, should have similar ESG elements in place. You make sure they are, because you can use them, but that your supply chain is also ESG compliant. The governance really is about making sure that the practices are in place and that the reporting is in place. If you have something, as let's say workplace health and safety is a really good example, that you have the governance around that you have the right training in place, and your business practices are ethical and safe, and you keep records if there are any kind of issues. And that goes, so they tie together. So governance is always about control and transparency. Well, control and being able to report really is the easiest way of putting on this. So your accounting integrity and transparency, you're not money laundering or fraud or anything else. So it's about doing the right thing and reducing any negative impacts. It's a really big subject. It's an enormous subject, which we could do an hour on without any difficulty whatsoever. When we sent you this slide, there is a link there to an ESG guide, just for small business, gives you some ways of delivering this. So don't be overwhelmed by it, because I think you'll find a lot of what you're already doing meets this. That's the point. You're probably already doing all this. This is just about formalizing it. So the key takeaways, you look at your business, a holistic view, you look at existing frameworks that exist that you can use, and that guide would help you. You provide tips that you understand what others are looking for. Yeah, you just look at how your business operates and anything you can improve. And if there's any kind of negative effect you think that has, either on business, the surrounding area, on the population in your area, on your staff, etc., you see what can you do to reduce that impact. And once you have a position that should be within this put in place, it needs to be one person's responsibility that they keep this together. Somebody who's not a full, it won't be a full-time role. There's going to be any person in your business. If it's you, then it's you. But it needs to be somebody that is responsible for ESG for your business. So that you're somebody that the key person who'll be asked a question about it. What's your strategy? What framework? What do you have in place? Somebody there that can answer those questions and is named in your response. So somebody you say it similar. If ESG is about reducing negative impact, social value is about what you can directly do. So instead of reducing, this is about improving things and showing how you can deliver positive outcomes within the community, be it social, economic, environmental. So examples of social value. Again, a lot of these things you'll probably already be doing. Promoting local skills and employment for all. So employment for all could mean, say for example, in a tender response, you decide you need to take on 3 more people in order to deliver that. And you decide that you're going to employ people from a particular cohort of, say, an age group, you're going to bring people back into work. You're going to upskill people. You're going to look for particular minorities. Whatever you decide to do, that you can justify is the right thing to do for the business and deliver, but also the right for the people that you can show is the right thing to do. That you support the growth of responsible local businesses, that means working with your supply chain, that you foster health and safety and more resilient communities, etc. That you're in a greener spaces, you have sustainable procurement, so you look at your supply chain. And that's what I mean, where it is similar to ESG, but is different at the same time. You're aiming to net zero, you influence all your stakeholders, you make positive steps to do that. And just going back to economic across all diversity, disadvantaged, disabled people, excluded communities, etc., etc., etc. However, there is more to this than even on here. Again, we could do a whole hour just on social value. But I have a view, and we'll go to that in a second. I have a view that in many ways, social value is small companies' superpower. And the reason why I say that is that it is far easier for a small company, certainly within the local community, to deliver social value than it is for a large company. And I know this from having worked for large corporate companies. And I'm going to quote Appleton because they like to plant trees, because obviously the social value in planting trees, that's an environmentally positive thing to do. So they thought. And my experience of that was planting trees are very expensive. And actually, a particular thing I was involved in, unfortunately, didn't prove to be environmentally friendly because they affected the drainage in the particular area where they planted the trees and caused more problems than they solved. But the point of making is that the local company understands the local area and can do things positively in that local area that displays social value. Because it can include things like set up apprenticeships and there's a whole series of things that you can do. On some leaders, it might be specific. They say that the social value they want you to demonstrate is environmental. So you go down the route. Other ones are just more general. But like I said, everything's a small thing, there's superpower. There is done by the Mayor of London, there is a guide to social value for London small businesses. I don't think there's something quite the same as this as where I am, which is a real shame. And I've looked through this document, and regardless it's aimed at London, it's a tremendous document. So when you get the slides, click this link, download that guide. It's a big stuff, but again, you'll surprise yourself how many things you're already naturally doing that you can list as being positive social value, but also give you some ideas as to what more you can do the right thing while also delivering the contract for the local council and also making sure that your company is profitable. So you can have a successful business and do the right thing at the same time. So applies to in time. So one of the things we suggest people do is to have a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So to look at your business and think, oh, listen, what for this particular tender, what are our strengths? What are our potential weaknesses? Which so we don't fully satisfy certain high score requirements. Okay, what can we do about that? What are opportunities? Well, it's a high value contract, it's prestigious. and the possibility for some partnership, which might help you with your weaknesses, interestingly enough. And what are your threats? And make it possible to advance if we don't win regulations of Canadian fast. So it's always good to look at this as a part of your process of deciding whether you're going to go forward with this particular tender. And to be really, when you're doing something like this, be really, really open and honest with yourself, yourself and your team. Be really open and say, right, no, if the weaknesses hugely outweigh the strengths and opportunities, then you've got to look hard as to whether you want to dedicate time. But if your strengths outweigh, there's obviously some weakness, but if your strengths and opportunities outweigh that, then you know how to proceed. That's the purpose of a SWOT analysis, and it is a really useful tool if you've not previously done it. In some of when you have your one-to-ones and the other works done, they'll go through this in more detail as to how to use a SWOT analysis effectively. It's a really useful tool. So I'm going to march on. So dynamic partnerships. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So the reason we're talking about partnerships is we mentioned earlier that there might be, for a small company, a new company, it might be hard for them to enter the public sector because they've not been around long enough. They don't have the balance sheet, and they don't have the financial weight that's required. So what you can do is you can look for partnerships. So two or more organisations are not able to individually meet all relevant requirements. Review the collective, put in a winning bid. Well, that's now the way this works is there is always a lead provider. And so there won't be two providers, there'll be one lead provider and then a supply chain. One company, two companies, three companies, can be multiple. So as I said, the only contract with a legal entity, one member of the consortium acting as the lead member to submit, contract with the lead bidder to deliver the service, pay the lead bidder. And then it's for that lead bidder to then distribute funds to the others. So they have to manage that, whoever the lead bidder is. And the different entities, so it can be what's known as an FPV, a special purpose vehicle, or it could be a partnership, or just a consortium, as long as it's understood how that consortium works. So there are some considerations around the how this is managed. Just got a question. Is it actually from part of the bidding? It's okay. So on the surface, the answer is yes, right? It's okay, but in as much as there is nothing to stop you on the face of it. However, it's sometimes it would probably worth asking the question on a particular response, because depending upon what it is. So an example would be my background in the IT and MI world is there are restrictions on data being made available outside the UK by some government departments, and that's strict, and that's causing some problems even with cloud-based services. So on the face of it, no, there's nothing to stop you, but you must ask the question. So it's not unusual to have, for example, use a call center abroad, etc. As long as it's all managed properly, the governance is in place and the risk is managed and you're clear about it. So on the surface of it, the answer is no, there's nothing to restrict you, but you need to ask the question so that it's understood, to make sure you don't go down this and actually find out that there's a restriction because of data or anything else that particular department's going to see as being an issue or a risk. So if some considerations around the legal rates on a consortium and partnership, make sure it's clear and understood and there's no issues later on, you don't end up in court. And the big writing, this is important, must be cohesive. We can't be put together by two different people and then stand up. It needs to read as one. So somebody has to manage that and lead it. And then if it's really complex, an external bid specialist will handle multiple contracts. Now, some things get really complex, and there can be 20 or 30 different contractors managed by a separate company. I'm not saying any of you would find yourself in that position, but if you were, then it needs somebody really specialized to manage that process. And essentially, what we're saying here is if you can do something, if you can do part of the contract and you find another company to do another part of the company, you manage as lead provider, or they can be the lead provider if they have been around longer and are more financially strong, at least on the surface, as far as the local authority is concerned, and then you work together to deliver that work. There is no restriction. There's no limitation on the response that it's a downside if there's a supply chain rather than a single provider. That's not seen as an issue at all. If I can just get to the next slide. There is also the ability to look at display existing suppliers. So the information is provided. We don't really go into this kind of about getting all the information on tenders. It's available on Find a Tender and Finder. And there are some commercial portals that might be worth a look at, but be careful about paying for free information. Is just what I would say on that. But you can look at a contract that's coming to an end, and you can find information on that particular company as to that. So use the data that can often be available on find a tender, when the contract was delivered, who it delivered to, when it ends. You can start building relationships with that department or that area ahead of time, knowing when the contract end date is coming up. You can start tailoring your solution that looking at well, this comes to an end in 6 months' time, for example. We can look at what we could deliver, and it may well be it will go out for another 2 years, for example. It won't be automatically extended for the company. They'll be putting it out to tender. You can get yourself already based upon any information about how that tender has gone. You basically pricing this competitively. That you look at that. What I would say on this about competitive bid pricing is you can see what's has been done before. You can see who it went to. You can see what the contract was worth. If you come up to people say, "Well, I don't want to go into work with a local council because we're not the cheapest." Well, you get that, and we talked about the difference between price and quality and how that works. But also, be aware it is worth considering the fact that it is possible that you might have a slightly lower margin working with, say, a local authority. You might decide to do that. And the reason why you might decide to do that is if you have a 3-year contract with your local authority, that's 3 years when you're going to get paid. It's saving a real issue that for some reason you really mess up. And if something goes wrong, you can always work through these things. But let's just put that to one side. So for 3 years, you're going to get paid and you're going to work and you're going to build your reputation through those 3 years. That's a situation that's almost impossible to replicate in the commercial world, because you can have a 3-year contract in the commercial world, but contracts get blown up, companies get bought, they go bust. What you need to do is look at the bigger picture. So nobody's saying that you should bid on a contract with a tender with a price that means you don't make money. Nobody's expecting to do that. And if one looks like you wouldn't make any money, then you walk away from it. But be prepared to look at what your current rate and how that works compared to what's happened before, but also making sure that you make sure that it is genuinely competitive. So in excessive direct contract bidding, you don't necessarily need to be the one. You could be partner with a larger company and be a supplier to them. You can help them with the response. You can even say we've seen something that we could do. We think you could do. Would you be interested in working together? But actually, they did the displacing, not you. Depending on how this actually works. It's just saying that there are opportunities for smaller companies to enter this market by partnering with another larger, just somebody maybe that's been around maybe a bit longer if you've not been around all that long. But even if you have been around, if a contract requires, in very simple terms, 2 services, and you can do 60% of it, you can find another company can do the other 40%, and you manage as lead bidder. I hope that makes sense. It is a real opportunity to look at things like that. So your tender journey. You look at a specific sector, subsector. Don't try and be all things to all people. If you have a business that does several different things, look at the thing that you do would be of most value in this market. Define your value proposition, refine it. I always say to be very introspective on the value that you offer, seen through the eyes of the public sector. Like really, really look hard about what you do and why it makes a difference to them. Your first one is to maximize return on investment. Obviously, it is limited time, and it has to be worthwhile. Subcontract for sexual experience. We've been talking about that. Focus area, then develop reference points and case studies. Really important. Case studies, testimonials, reviews. Really, really big deal to evidence what you've done in the past. Think big but start small. It's very tempting to go for huge contracts, but actually there are smaller ones in some areas. Some of these much smaller ones actually are far more straightforward to respond to than some of the bigger ones. They're not maybe quite as detailed in the tenant response they need, but certainly get some small ones, getting understanding how contracts work. Don't turn small contracts down that you could do as long as they're cost effective for you. You look for these opportunities. You look at tender alerts, LinkedIn, networking exhibitions. Obviously, you get on Find a Tender and Contract Finder. Look out for advanced investigators again. If you can get yourself talking to your local authority, so talking to Hillingdon about meet the buyer events, you'll be finding obviously a lot more out about because of the Fit to Bid program. But if you're not in the Fit to Bid program, then you should contact your local authority to ask them when their next meet the buyer events are. There we go. Meet the buyer events are, so you can engage early and have conversations about what they need. And while you can't circumnavigate the process, the fact is that those relationships still work. You can look at what your major differentiators are. What is it that you can do? You build your social value. You look at them. You understand what community wealth building is, which is where councils are under a lot of pressure to make sure they keep the wealth within the community, and they do that by giving business to local companies. And then you look at, can we do it? And then can we win it? And we can win it if you do all these things properly. So your key considerations, your compliance, you have to deliver YU. These are things that we went through in the other presentations. You focus on the customer, like I say, you use their terminology, you mirror them, their approach, you mirror them. You build a compelling solution using empathic language. You make sure your proposal is very, very high quality. You make it easy to evaluate because you've answered every question really clearly, succinctly, using very clear and easy to understand language, and you supply the evidence. If you hit all those marks, then there's a very, very good chance that you're going to win that tender. We've seen so many poor tenders by small companies and a lot of them by very, very large companies that do not hit all these marks properly. So you do all that, and you're in a very, very good position. That's, I know that was a lot. I'm conscious of time. I did say it was going to be a lot to get through in the time that we had. So there are recordings of this will go up, and the previous ones are also up on the Brandon channel, as well as other webinars done by my other colleagues in Brandon on different subjects. You go to YouTube channel, and they're really interesting. They're full of information, and there's lots of these to take in, and then you can ask some more questions of different other programs that are also available for Hillingdon. You will be looking to, when we talked about the your one-to-one, etc., they'll be looking to put together an action plan, a real key thing for you to deliver. This all detailed to account as to how you're going to deliver this and how you're going to act in getting into the public sector, and how you're going to make that work. By who, by when. These simple things, simple action plans really work. I've based my entire career on simple action plans. This really does work. And then the program schedule. So here we are on May the 14th, right in public sectors. There is some further sessions here. Your Meet the Buyer event July the 3rd, with the venue to be confirmed, and then other areas all around this entire program for you. So lots to go for. And if you're finding this useful, I did warn you, it was a lot of information in a short period of time. Please, when it goes up, look at the video, look at the deck when it's shared with you. And we've just got a couple more slides to go through. Your one-to-one tender advice sessions, you know, this is that building this information up, a bespoke delivery plan for yourself. Because what we talk about here obviously is general, it's general information for all of you, but you all have your own unique businesses, you all operate in slightly different ways. And the idea behind this action plan is to deliver something that's specific to you. So really, really valuable. Make the most of those 2 sessions. Across those 3 hours over the 2 sessions, I think so incredibly valuable. And remember that the PB's they're there to help you. Registering is easy for any of this. You'll go to bid.co.uk. You'll get to see they'll ask you to fill in a questionnaire, get the information done, book your one-to-one, and make the most of this incredible process, and ultimately end up with any round of more information. And you also get to that incredible Meet the Buyer event, to be in the room with all those procurement people from both the public sector and tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. So some of the things here: register the skills program, book a one-to-one advice, and excuse me, if you get those things done, then they'll take you through the rest of the process. Ultimately, you're submit and that's an expression of interest. That's the very, very first part of this, and then develop a winning bid. So if you go through this process, go to the bid, or you can give Carly a call. I think, Carly, are you on? I think you actually are on the call, are you not? And I think he was. I can't remember if he was at the beginning. So you can call Carly. We've got an employee that manages the event and delivers a lot of these one-to-one sessions. Or send him an email and talk in more detail. But make the most of this program. It is unique. One of my interests in this is that this doesn't exist in most parts of the country. It's only what Brandon are doing down here in the southeast. You're really quite fortunate. And with that, I know we haven't got enough time, so as long as you don't need to rush off, I will stay on. If there's any questions, and I know you've just been hit with so much information, if there's any questions, I will attempt to answer them for you now. Thank you, Tina. Thank you very much. It sounds a brilliant session. It's quite a daunting number of language to get through, but hopefully now you'll all feel a little bit more empowered. Actually, you'll see terminology. Well, actually, I know what that is, so I have an idea about what that is. And I just want you to grasp the opportunities because we want to give to all of you. You are needed. The local authorities need small businesses to deliver the services that are there. So 3 hours from London, one hour. Thanks very much, Sam. We just feel a bit like I'm going to get something out of it, but take the opportunity. There's opportunities in there. It's worth people to speak from experience of having done it myself. Thank you so much to everybody. Have a really, really good day. The flag of gratitude, follow all the links, download the guides, make the most of it. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for another minute or so, but thank you very much for staying with me and make the most of this. Good luck to you all.